Hello all and welcome in here to another edition of the Pens Iceberg. I'm your host Casey Stamp, and with us as always are the members of our expert panel, Luke Courtwright and Jason Kaczynski. How you doing this evening, Luke?
Never quite as fun after a loss, is it?
Never quite as fun after a loss. Even so, we love doing the show. We love bringing you guys the programs. So glad you could be here. Jason, how's it going?
Tough loss tonight, but it's always an entertaining and interesting game at the Garden.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, so glad to have you all here on this Tuesday night. We hope your Thanksgiving was a good and happy one, and we've certainly got a lot to discuss tonight. First up, game analysis of the Pens-Rangers game. Then we're going to discuss Max Pacioretty's hit on Chris Letang and his subsequent suspension, as well as the fine to James Neal for a high stick. We'll finish up, as always, with some game predictions, so don't go anywhere. Stick around, and we've got a great show headed your way right here on the Pens Iceberg. Welcome back. The Pens faced off against the New York Rangers tonight at Madison Square Garden, and just 16 seconds in, Tyler Kennedy and Sean Avery go at it. Bit of a mismatch there. I'd still say Kennedy won the fight. If tackling was an effective means of winning a fight, then Zdeno Chara might be the best that's ever lived. But this game would be very physical the entire way through. First period, some offense early for Pittsburgh as James Neal would net the first goal in this game in his 14th of the season on the power play. But in total, 28 penalty minutes assessed in the first period alone. Jason, we'll start with you here. What do you make of the start of this game?
I really like the start from the Penguins, especially being without two of their top four defensemen this game. It looked a little shaky to start. The MSG crowd was going early. The Boo Birds were out on the refs, harping on the penalty calls. The Pens got to Lundqvist early. They couldn't put anything past them. I like what they did in the power play, especially Crosby's sweet pass to Neal coming down the slot wide open. They got some good things going. Just unfortunately they couldn't sustain it the length of the game.
Yeah, games against the Rangers and any divisional games, really, they've always taken a more physical nature. And it really seemed like the Pens wanted to beat them to the punch this game. Kennedy and Avery, I'm not really sure what's going on there because they have fought multiple times prior to this even. And it's usually Tyler Kennedy challenging Avery. So we can't really criticize Sean Avery for backing down from a fight. So it's kind of difficult to see what's going on there. I think with Sidney Crosby coming back, knowing that these games usually are of a more physical tone, you want to make that effort to really back your opponent off early.
Absolutely, and going back to what you said, it's odd about Tyler Kennedy. Not usually a fighter, but for some reason does love to scrap with Sean Avery. Second period, everything just kind of went straight downhill for the Pens as goal after goal would get by the Penguins' defense and Marc-Andre Fleury. First it was Ryan Callahan, then it would be John Mitchell, Brad Richards, and then finally Marian Gaborik. Luke, in your opinion, what caused this to get so ugly so fast for the Pens?
Well, the Pens had a really rough night through the middle of the defensive zone. Looking at that first goal, you have Gaborik skating right through the slot before getting the puck over to Callahan on the power play nonetheless, but still, usually the Penguins really strong through the middle of the ice. Then you had back-to-back goals there from between the circles. Just really strong wrist shots, right, glove side, over the glove hand of Marc-Andre Fleury. So Pittsburgh really needed to do a stronger job contesting shots in transition, which is usually a huge strength, usually really good blocking shots in front.
I thought the Rangers were pretty good on the forecheck and were aggressive in the offensive zone, just keeping it down and wearing Pittsburgh down a little bit. The goal I was most disappointed with was probably the second goal, the first one in the second period by John Mitchell. Well, basically starts out as a 3-on-3 play, and Tyler Kennedy gets a little bit aggressive as soon as Carl Hagelin enters the offensive zone. He jumps on the puck carrier, leaving Mitchell wide open. And it's just pretty easy shot that goes by Fleury, and it snowballed fast from there.
Absolutely, and definitely noteworthy that tonight the Penguins were really missing two of their best defensemen in Chris Letang and McCulloch, and you got to give Bortuzzo and Picard credit. Young guys coming up from the AHL, especially Bortuzzo. No one really knew what he was going to look like in the NHL this season, and then we saw him in the game against Los Angeles. He looked pretty good in that game. And got to give the kid all the credit. And, he's trying. He's definitely making a case that in the future he could possibly have a spot on this team. And Evgeny Malkin would score at the end of the second period to bring it a little closer, making it 4-2. But then in the third period, Pascal Dupuis, boy, what a fantastic season this guy's having, making it 4-3. But then after that, the Pens just seemed to lose all composure down the stretch, as they would be penalized 4 times in the last 10 minutes of this game. Jason, what caused the Pens to take so many penalties there at the end?
This is something that we're really not used to seeing a ton of from this team. They were just really undisciplined, and I think that's just I don't know how else to describe it. They kill off 2 5-on-3s. They take 4 straight penalties, kill off 2 5-on-3s in the process, and while you have your star offensive players, resting on the bench and get a run at this last goal here, you're expending your energy killing off penalty after penalty, and although it was impressive, it was just the Pens just simply ran out of time, and just not a trait we're used to seeing from this team, and I expect that to be corrected rather quickly.
Yeah, it was really a case of them shooting themselves in the foot. You often hear about good penalties and bad penalties. These are definitely bad penalties. You can shrug it off sometimes if some of these penalties are taken in desperation, but they weren't in this case. The Kunitz boarding penalty is in particular for me. There's no reason to be making that play at all. It really killed any momentum. It was about with 3 minutes left, I think, and really ruined any chance it had of coming back.
And the thing about the lack of discipline that the Pens showed there at the end is it does unfortunately reflect on the leadership, because you think about composure, and the leaders are supposed to be the ones providing that. And there's no doubt that Sidney Crosby really provided good leadership tonight, and he obviously had a couple points. But unfortunately, and this is not maybe the case in some Pens fans' eyes, but this ultimately reflects on Dan Bilesma, which that's not a reflection of him as a person or a coach, but any time that a team loses composure or discipline, it reflects on their leaders, and that's who is going to get the look for this one in a lot of casual hockey fans' eyes. And I think that after this game, Dan Bilesma definitely needs to sit the players down and give them a stern talking to, because they can't be doing that at the end of games, especially when you're talking about division rivalries, playing on the road, things that are very crucial in winning the division and winning the East and winning games altogether. You have to have composure, especially down the stretch. And the Pens would eventually go on to lose this game by the final score of 4-3. And as I said, a game that the Pens really could have won, and I firmly believe that, but a late lack of discipline was simply too much to overcome. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break. When we return, we're going to talk about Max Pacioretty's suspension for his hit on Chris Letang. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Brendan Shanahan has already been such a focal point this season for change in the National Hockey League. Hockey is a game that continues to grow and progress, and the rule changes that have been made in recent years have been made to better protect the players. Luke, we'll start with you here. How has the game changed since, say, the time of Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky?
For me, personally, it really revolves around conditioning. You use Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky as examples here. You look at Mario, and he's this incredible natural talent, which is even more remarkable because he didn't watch what he ate, and he never was really committed to off-ice training. And then you look at Wayne Gretzky, who's below average size, always a really gangly guy. Just off-season fitness was somewhat of a joke, and heavy skating drills were seen more as punishment than actually part of your job, I suppose. But now we look at these players, they're finely tuned athletes as much as any other sport. So we have lighter sticks, we have larger equipment, and the speed of the game is picked up exponentially as a result of that.
I definitely agree. You have the evolution of the athlete here. A good point, I think, is Gary Roberts, who suffered a horrific neck injury in middle part of his career, and when he thought it was over, he turned himself into a fitness guru, and it just really extended his shelf life, and he's kind of imparted that to the younger players of the game. I I think the new rules have really benefited the overall offensive gameplay a little bit. I mean, back when you retired in '97, you were at the height of the clutch and grab era. 66 would be coming down the offensive zone and just be draped with a player or two, stick on at his waist, which would be easily called today. And I think we're getting away from that a little bit. I think the officials are calling those penalties, but it's not really reflective in the scoring. Since the lockout, each year you have the goals per game average has gone down. And right now they're looking at changing some penalty calls, not really rules per se, as far as protecting the health of the players. But overall, the gameplay has been pretty much the same.
And of course, we hear a lot of former players say that the speed of the game is really the biggest difference. And going back to what Luke said a little bit, the athletes are just of such a very high caliber, training all summer, as we saw Chris Letang and Evgeny Malkin do. The athletes really train all summer. They're on strict diets. They work out as hard as I think a person could. And really the speed of the game and the physicality and just the intensity it really seems to have picked up, since that era. And of course, it's very difficult to balance some of the rule changes that have been made and new safety measures with some of the more old school hockey fans that want to see as much physicality as they can. Jason, in your opinion, has Brendan Shanahan kept that balance of new school and old time hockey in place thus far?
I would say the jury is still out on that one. He's only been at this for 3 months right now. Listening to some of the comments from players lately, it seems like there's a lot of confusion as to what's a good hit and what isn't. Why is this a legal hit to the head and why is this one not? If it were up to me, I would just make any hit to the head illegal, as far as leaving it up to the league to review whether it's suspension worthy or not. But penalizing every hit to the head. Hitting in the game is designed to separate the player from the puck. Take the body is a phrase that's been used throughout the years. Just don't make it part of the head. Just don't make the head part of the body.
Yeah, I've never been really one of these old school versus new school guys. I've always thought that whenever you have a problem, that's when you address it. And I really think Brendan Shanahan's done a solid job of that thus far anyway. Concussions were quickly becoming an issue, so the league made it a priority to take out headshots, which was the right move in my opinion. I like that. And I don't think physicality is being taken out of the game like some seem to be clamoring about. I think they're working on taking stupidity out of the game, which will only improve the quality of play in my mind. So that all being said, though, I still hate the shootout personally, but that rant is for another day.
And yeah, we heard Peter LaFontaine, one of the legends of the game, obviously talk about the concussion protocol and what they have as far as concussion protocol today. And obviously he suffered with concussions in his career. He said he would have, wished that it would have been today the same way it should have been 20 years ago. I don't know if I worded that right, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. Concussion protocol should have always been this way, but as we move along, we learn more about concussions and about the anatomy and about just the nature of the game itself. And as changes go along, hopefully players can have a pretty easy time adapting to it, and fans should have an easy time adapting as well, because it's still the game that they love so much. And it's impossible to please everyone all the time, but ultimately the league hopes to find that middle ground, that equilibrium that can please both sides. Monday it was announced that Max Pacioretty has been suspended 3 games for his hit on Chris Letang. For those of you that did not see the game, it was a blindside check to the head in which the head was targeted and ultimately resulted obviously in that injury to Chris Letang. He suffered a broken nose out of the lineup tonight along with Zbigniew McCulloch, but he would ultimately in the Montreal game come back to score the overtime winner, much to the disdain of Habs fans for the way that it happened. Luke, as far as the length of the suspension, are you satisfied that the league chose the appropriate amount of games?
It feels like a decent length. I've seen a handful of people compare it to the Cook on Savard hit minus the elbow, which still seems like kind of an outlandish comparison. With the way suspensions are now, we almost want to tie the length of the suspension to a comparable hit. So I think we kind of grasp at straws sometimes. But this hit in particular, we've seen hits like this get away with a fine or nothing at all. I don't think Colin Campbell would have done anything about this, but I definitely do think we expected something from Brendan Shanahan. 2 or 3 games seem to be a consensus for most people, I think.
I'm fine with it too. It seems to be with the right amount of games. Pacioretty isn't known as a dirty player. I don't think that he had any intent to injure Letang. That being said, this is the kind of hit they're trying to take out of the game, so I think if they wanted to make a little bit of a statement there, Letang was willing to take a hit to get a shot off. He just expected it to be a body check. He didn't expect to take an elbow or a forearm to the head or what resulted in a broken nose.
And of course, Max apologized to Chris after the game, saying it was unintentional, but that's not how the league and that's not how Brendan Shanahan deemed it. And a key point to many of Shanahan's suspensions thus far has been minimizing the contact on checks that are indeed illegal. And of course, we saw that same thing with the Letang suspension earlier when he hit Burmistrov. One of the key points was that he didn't minimize the contact. And if you know an illegal check may be imminent, that's what you're supposed to do is minimize the contact. And I've heard a ton of arguments going both ways. And speaking of, if you're watching out there tonight, T, how you doing, Wah, from Facebook, I definitely had a heated debate with him. He's a Detroit Red Wings fan. Had a heated debate with him about this very subject. Jason, in your opinion, did Max Pacioretty have an opportunity to minimize the contact, or based on the position of Chris Letang, was the hit inevitable?
The hit I think the hit might have been inevitable, but I think he definitely had a chance to minimize the impact. Players move at a fast enough pace, where they can beat a goalie at full speed during a game or during the shootout. They can pull up whenever they want to avoid contact. So the game does move at a lightning fast pace, but it's not fast enough where they can't have a control over if they want to follow through with the check or to hold up. Or I guess my big complaint with him following through was that Letang got his shot off pretty good on the goalie. I mean, what was Pacioretty doing, since he couldn't obviously tie him up with a hit or tie up his stick to not have him not get the shot off. So he definitely could have minimized the impact there.
I'm kind of torn on it. Even looking back, I don't think there was ever the head of Chris Letang was ever targeted. Certainly contact was made there, but I don't think the intention was really there. It was more of a circumstantial thing. Letang had his head down coming across the blue line. He's a player who sits particularly low on his skates. Jason mentioned before, and I agree, it seemed like he had seen Pacioretty coming, but he really wanted to get that shot off, so he was willing to take a hit in the middle of the ice to make that play. So this falls in kind of a gray area for me. I'm definitely in favor of getting headshots out of the game, but I'm not sure if you can really classify this as a headshot, because we want to tie in blindside and headshot and tie them together. In this case, I don't really think that works. And it's really hard for me to place a whole lot of blame on Pacioretty for this hit.
Absolutely, and the league trying to really find some consistency in their supplementary discipline and eliminate some of that gray area. And, of course, as we heard in Brandon Shanahan's video explanation, he seemed to think that Chris Letang's head made no sudden movements prior to the hit that would have left him any more susceptible to injury or an illegal hit to the head. Luke, considering who it was that hit Chris Letang, being that this is a player that really made so much of last year's check buys at NHL, of course it wasn't his idea to file the police report in Montreal that they had just actually ended the investigation a few weeks back for really what was just a ridiculous thing that happened in a hockey game that had no place in law. Do you think that who it was had any impact on Shanahan's decision to suspend?
Not at all. Max Pacioretty, he's a guy who finishes his checks. He can bang some bodies, but like Jason said earlier, he's not at all a dirty player. I think it can be looked at as a somewhat strange coincidence, but really at the end of the day, these plays aren't even similar in nature. So I don't think it really plays into it at all.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different slant on that. I mean, I don't think it was brought up during the hearing at all, but I think it may have played like a small role in it. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall during the phone hearing. If I'm doling out punishment, I would think that a player that is less than a year recovered from a horrific injury suffered at the hands of what Pacioretty himself considered a careless play would be more mindful of a headshot in a game. So it may have played a small role, but very, very minute, if that.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that Brendan Shanahan really made what he felt to be the right decision, regardless of what player it was, although that may or may not have been taken into account. I certainly, as well, Jason, would have liked to hear that discussion. I'm sure that Habs fans, Pens fans, and all fans alike would have liked to be in on that and find out exactly the details of it. But in any case, Max Pacioretty will miss the next 3 games for the Montreal Canadiens. James Neal was also fined $2,500 for a high-sticking call in this game against PK Subban, in which it appeared that the penalty was a result of a trip by PK Subban. Jason, can you give us your perspective on this fine and on this penalty?
Well, the Penguins, for the most part during the game, heeded Bob Aries' comments at the beginning, and one of his points was to ignore Subban, and it can be difficult to do. The Penguins are very familiar with his work. He's an agitator, a yapper, downright dirty at times. And this happened after Subban had attempted to engage the Penguins in some shenanigans, several times during the game. I think there was after a scrum in front of Fleury was finished, Subban came and yanked the bleed down from behind in the headlock, and later on in the third period, Subban has Neal with Neal's back to him and nudges his skates out from underneath him, which, if you want to call it a super foot, that's fine. If you want to call it a trip, that's fine. But it's a dirty play, and it can be very harmful. It's not dramatic, but it's still dangerous. Did Neal hit him on purpose? I don't know, but I think with the league doling out this fine, they're saying this is a no-no, and they may have said that, we think you tried to whack him. And after the stuff that Subban pulled during the game, I'm not surprised. And I think maybe some of the Neal's Penguin teammates might be able to chip in on that fine.
I'm actually a huge PK Subban fan, but this particular play, I thought it was a pretty deliberate tomahawk by James Neal. I was actually watching the Hockey Night in Canada feed for this game, and I think it was Glenn Healy who was doing color commentary, and kept saying how Glenn Anderson was a master of the same play, how he would act like he was falling. And James Neal was definitely falling. His skate was definitely kicked out. But I guess Glenn Anderson would do the same kind of one-handed tomahawk to the top of the head. But I was pretty convinced that Neal definitely did this on purpose. Honestly, if the maximum fine for on-ice plays wasn't so laughably low, I would have been fine with a higher fine as well. I think in all of our discussions about headshots and everything, it'd be pretty hypocritical to condemn headshots but then give this a free pass. So I think it was definitely on purpose, and I think it deserved something for sure.
We all know that, love him or hate him, PK Subban is one of the most controversial players in the NHL. A lot like a Matt Cook or a Sean Avery. Not saying that he's as dirty as those players. Obviously, I don't believe that he is, but he is definitely as controversial in the way that players view him. And any player or team that plays Montreal, because he is an agitator, you always have to be on guard because you never know what antics he's got up his sleeve for that particular game. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to have some game analysis for you. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Pens road trip continues Thursday night as they will take on their arch nemesis, who now has a new head coach in Dale Hunter. Of course, the news being handed down yesterday that Bruce Boudreau was fired. The Washington Capitals will be playing the Pittsburgh Penguins on Thursday. Luke, what does Dale Hunter bring to the Capitals team, and what do you expect to see in this game?
Well, Dale Hunter definitely brings intensity. He's got that definitive serial killer glare about him. he'll definitely hold players accountable. He just has that personality, and I really think he's going to make an effort to get Ovechkin on the ice as much as he can. Of course, I'm saying that, and I think Ovechkin played the lowest amount of minutes tonight of the entire season. But I still think the Caps are going to make another move or two here. We talked about it before. I really think they're going to do something with Alex Semin here, if anybody else wants to take him. So we'll see how they do on this initial stretch. I don't think the Pens are going to be happy with their defensive effort tonight. So this could really end up being a tight checking game. I'm going to go with 2-1 Pens.
As a player, Dale Hunter was an agitator who just scored some absolutely huge goals for the Capitals in the playoffs, many of them overtime winners. The last 10 years, he's turned the London Knights in the OHL into a perennial contender, along with his brother. He's had players such as Rick Nash, Corey Perry, Patrick Kane, and John Tavares. What's interesting is that he's won in the OHL with a brand of fire wagon hockey. Are the Caps going back to that? I think it would be closer to that than the defensive style they've tried to play with this year. With any coaching change, I think the Caps will get a little bit of an initial boost. No matter what problems any of the players have with Boudreaux, they get to wipe the slate clean and start over. But I think any kind of intimidation or punishment tactics a coach can use on a junior player, that's definitely not going to work in the NHL. So it's an adjustment on Hunter's part there. I expect a motivated Sid to lead the Pens to a close victory on the road. I'm going to go 4-3. Pens win.
Absolutely, and I think Dale Hunter's going to be a very dangerous weapon for this Washington Capitals team to acquire. You look at some of the players that he's coached as youth, talking about Rick Nash and Patrick Kane, Steve Mason. He certainly really coached some great players, and from what he said in his press conference yesterday, he seems to want to make the team a more gritty defensive team, a lot like the Penguins, a lot of cycling the puck here. I think you're going to see a lot more of guys like Jason Chimera and Joel Ward getting a lot more minutes for the Caps, and if that's the case, that could be a dangerous thing for the Pens, because grit is, I really believe, what the Caps lacked in a lot of aspects. And of course, anytime you lose your rapport with your star player, as Bruce Boudreau did with Alexander Ovechkin and Alex Semin, you're on borrowed time. Anytime that happens. And then on Saturday, yet another team with a new coach in Carolina, Paul Maurice getting the axe there, and Kirk Muller filling in for him. Of course, Kirk Muller was previously the head coach of the AHL team, the Norfolk Admirals. Jason, we'll start with you this time. What does Kirk Muller offer to the Hurricanes, and how do you see this game shaking out?
Kirk Muller offers some great championship experience without having been, too far removed from his playing days. A great 19-year career, Stanley Cup champion. He's been a head coach at the college level, pro assistant in Montreal, a short stint this year as a head coach at the AHL level. It's kind of, without training camp or just jumping in on the fly, it's going to be really difficult for him just to come in and throw in a new system, his system, so to speak. But I think his number one priority is going to be to help Eric Stahl find his game. Stahl had looked lost this year without former linemate Eric Cole, who's now in Montreal. That being said, I think the Canes are still thin up front. The Pens fell in Raleigh in a tough one earlier this year, but that was without Sid, so I'll take the Pens 3-1.
I was really surprised when nobody snatched Kirk Muller up in the offseason. There's a lot of buzz around him and the job he did kind of as an X's and O's guy with Montreal here. But as a player, he was always a great two-way guy, and you would think he's really continued that through his coaching style. With Milwaukee, they had the lowest goals against in the AHL, with a huge amount of rookies on their roster too. With the Canes' depth issues, obviously, they're really going to need to build around defense for the time being anyway. Of course, I think he's going to be a lot more successful with a full year and a full offseason to kind of get things going there. But I'll say 3-2 Pens, but this could really turn out to be another big defensive battle this week.
Well, it's certainly been a week to remember in the NHL, and 2 coaching changes, Sidney Crosby's return, and a lot of great and memorable games. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for this week. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. Luke, as always, it's been a pleasure, and we definitely look forward to seeing you again next week.
Looking forward to it.
Hopefully next week it's after a win. Jason, always thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you next week.
Looking forward to hopefully talking about some big road wins next week.
Absolutely, and start to get this road trip off on the right foot. And from all of us here at the Pens Iceberg, thanks so much for stopping by, and have a fantastic week.